Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, this one is for all the sales leaders, whether you're new, you're tenured, or a small business owner. I had the absolute pleasure to sit down with Jake Thompson, who I met at NSA. He's a 2 times author. He is a podcast host and founder of Compete Every Day, and he's a speaker. And Jake, definitely you'll feel his energy and enthusiasm. He definitely walks the talk. And a lot of what we talked about is, as leaders, we are motivating our team, we're inspiring them, and the goal is to drive results through people. And so to do this, we definitely need some hard leadership skills, but a lot of it is just, what are we doing ourselves to prepare? Like, how are we showing up so that we have the mindset of a winner, of one person who is, who competes with themselves every day, who doesn't compare themselves, who looks at if they're feeling not as confident as they could be, have they stacked their wins in the past that they can go back into their library and say, okay, when was I feeling imposter syndrome or, a time that I perhaps couldn't do something and I overcame it. And just that level of honesty and vulnerability with yourself, that's what's required these days. I feel that those people who stand up there and they're the sage on the stage and they think they know anything, nobody wants to get behind you because you're not relatable. And so he talks about, how do we show up every day? How do we prepare ourselves? How do we really like Kaizen approach? How do we get 1% better every day? And a lot of it is, detaching from the outcome and looking at the process and what's ultimately within our control. And the reason this is so important as leaders is because our team is looking up to us. And they're basically saying, are you modeling the standard of excellence? And if you're not, they're not going to get behind you. So a lot of it is, how are you showing up? How are you preparing yourself? How are you priming yourself? Do you have a morning routine? And does it consist of, having a cup of coffee as you scroll your phone first thing in the morning? Well, that might not be what you need to get you to that next level. And so is this a real invitation to look introspective, who we are today and what do we aspire to be? And how can we start developing those skills and aligning with that future state so we're over time, we're bridging the gap. So definitely encourage you to take a listen. I am always learning. I am an avid learner, and just being in his company, in his presence, I could feel my energy and my excitement increasing. I align with everything he says, but again, the way in which he shares it and the stories and the energy and passion he brings, it's contagious. So definitely take a listen. Let us know if there's anything that stood out that you applied. And of course, we want to celebrate you as much as you celebrate yourself. Share it, tag us in it, and we can celebrate you as well. If you enjoyed the podcast, please feel free to share it with someone that you feel could benefit from this. It might be someone on your team. It might be another leader. Also, we would love feedback. When we get feedback in the form of a review, it increases our visibility and allows us to attract guests like Jake. So please find some time to leave us a review, and hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And like always, we'll see you next time. And I am delighted to bring Jake Thompson to the podcast. Welcome, Jake.
Hey, Karen. Good to see you again. It's been a few months since we left off air, but it's great. It's great to spend some time together this morning.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's podcast host to podcast host. So I don't know if it's good to be in the passenger seat, or would you rather be driving?
Typically if it's an actual car, I'm going to say I like to be driving. I have a great co-pilot in my wife who tells me when I do things incorrectly. But on the podcast side, I have fun both ways, right? It's a learning experience on both sides of the mic. And just looking forward to today's conversation, hopefully adding some value to your loyal listeners.
Yeah, well, I know you will because you've added value, in the short time I met you. And I just a shout out to Lori Richardson, who is a great friend of yours. I know you've known for years, and she's obviously a good friend of mine. But she was the conduit that brought us together at
Yep.
NSA a few months ago. So thank you, Lori.
Yes, Lori and I trained together years ago. We went through a program together on the speaking side, and she's one of the sweetest humans. So I hope you're listening, Lori. I hope you know that. Uh, yeah, thanks for connecting us.
She is. She's amazing. So I've anyone that doesn't know you, they're going to know you after this conversation. But your experience and your passion for leadership and excellence is you exude it, which is great because I feel like as a leader we have to model the behavior.
So in my workshops, Jake, a lot of the time I'll start with leadership training, and sometimes it's conflict resolution, effective communication, and that's what they're looking for, and those are important courses. But I like to take a step back and just understand, their mindset, like the importance of mindset, how they are showing up, what are they doing to prepare themselves to show up authentically so that they can inspire their team and lead their team. And I find that a lot of people are not doing that, and they look at me as if I have horns. And so I'm just curious, are you seeing that same approach where they're more looking at the hard skills, the tactical, or are you seeing perhaps a shift to the importance of mindset and looking inward as to how we intentionally need to show up?
I'm going to say yes and no. So I see the same thing time and time again because when we talk mindset, when we talk foundation, it's very woo woo, especially in corporate, especially in sales. It's woo woo, right? No, we don't need that. We actually just need sales strategies. We don't need ways to better connect and improve how we coach and develop people. We just need better talent. Like we focus so much on the hard side because we assume there's one formula, one step, one action that if we just do that one thing, it's going to change everything. And what we fail to realize, like anything else, right? Just changing that isn't going to change anything else if the foundation is complete crap. And so we very much same way. Now, why I said yes and no is because yes, I see it prevalent. But where I do see a change is there's conversations around people who want to improve, who have that growth mindset, who are more open to really evaluating what is my mentality? What are my routines? Like, what am I doing? Because as you and I both discussed off air, leadership starts first with the person in the mirror. It's going to do us no good on how we change communication styles and what sales strategies we put in place and what our closing line is if we're not leading ourselves effectively. And so that's where it has to start. So I think there's more conversations around it today, but it's not common. And the beauty of that is, I don't think it's ever going to be, which means the competitive advantage lies with the people who are willing to address, face it, and then put in the work to improve it.
I love that because that competitive advantage is within your own control. And from what I heard you say, the first step has to be the desire to improve. Like you want to get better. And then the second part was more you have to be curious and really look inward and say, like, what am I doing? Like, what is that kind of snapshot of my current state? Because only when I understand where I'm at and what I'm doing or not doing can I start, looking at where I want to take it.
Yeah. No, that's true. And one of the things you mentioned off air that I loved is you talk to a lot of people and leaders and you're like, well, what's your morning routine? You're like, I just have a cup of coffee and I get into my inbox. And that's what most people do, right? We're like, I let my inbox dictate my priorities. I just wake up and have some breakfast and I'm out the door and listen to sports talk radio going to work and grab my coffee and go. And I know that because I was in that spot. Like I was that person when I was an early consultant years and years ago. Like I know going through that. But I also know what that fails to do, and that's prepare you to win the day. And having the routine, the way I look at it is if you evaluate the things you do on a daily basis and you look at all of your coworkers or what's pretty standard across the industry, and you're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, why would you expect to have different results? Because at the end of the day, we have to do the little things a little bit differently in order to get the outcomes that are different than what everyone else has. And so the curiosity is a big piece. Most people lack the ability to stay curious. Why? Because our ego gets in the way. We get some sales, we start to grow in our career, and we feel like, I got this figured out. Versus at the beginning, we're like, what can I learn? How can I get better? And what we see over the course of individuals' careers is the people who are constantly looking for ways to A, stay curious on how they improve, but B, stay curious on how do I lead better? How do I better connect with prospects and clients? How do I add more value to these people? They're the ones that continuously excel. And everybody else looks at them and says, must be nice. Oh, I wish I had that much sales talent. And they fail to realize that curiosity is a choice that sets you apart.
Wow, so much goodness there. And you know, when I think about either business owners like entrepreneurs or even leaders, it's what got you there is not enough to get you to the next step. And that's what I'm hearing. Like when you plateau or when you
Yep.
get a few sales, you're like, yeah, I'm good now. But I just think there's another four gears that you haven't even tapped into that could take you. But like you said, either the mind or the complacency or that comfort is like, I'm good here.
It's always the mind. It's always the mind. One of the things that we talk about heavily at our company, Compete Every Day, is go against your default, because your default is what's comfortable. The default is, hey, let me sleep longer, not let me get up and go run first thing in the morning. Your default is the first time you hear no to take it as is versus saying, well, I wonder why they're saying no. And what can I learn on? Maybe it was something on my end. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe I have the wrong decision maker. There's all sorts of things that are default programming from what's comfortable and protective of our ego that actually go against helping us grow. And to your point, each level that we grow to throughout our career requires a different level of us, right? The skills that make you successful as a performer are not going to make you as successful as a manager or a director or a CEO. It's a different skill set you have to develop. And we fail to realize that. Two reasons. One, we assume just because what got us there is going to help us keep going, right? And a lot of us early on in our career, we've got some talent, right? We have some natural communication skills, or we're really easy to connect with people, or we pick up something fairly quickly. And that's a very dangerous trap, because eventually you have to get to a point to improve that skill. And improving any skill is messy. It's sloppy. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. And that scares away most people, right? If I'm not really good at it, I don't want to try it. But if you have the mentality of this constant curiosity of, hey, if I want to get to that next level, I got to start over and I got to rebuild it. And for me, it was the idea, I think back to sports, right? Who I was as a middle school quarterback was very different than who I had to be as a freshman level quarterback. And then if I wanted to be a starter on varsity, I had to develop myself in a way to play at that level. And then when I went to college, and my ignorant head and immature head, it was like, oh, it's just a continuation. No, it was starting all over again at a new level. And I had to develop myself into a different individual at a next level. And it's the same in our career. And so as we grow, one of the things I encourage leaders is develop the skills for where you are, but you should be thinking about what's next. If you're a manager, sales manager, what are the things that a director is having to think about, prioritize, do, that you can start working on those skills now so that you're more aware when you get there? If you want to eventually be the CEO of a company or start your own organization, what are the skills that you need to start developing to get there, so that while you're improving yourself in the now to do better work, you're also planting seeds for the future, so that that growth process hopefully is a little bit smoother and quicker than it would be once you get there and are trying to figure it out in the moment.
hmm that's amazing. And there's a quote that reminds me of Hal Elrod. He wrote the Miracle Morning, and he has a
Yep.
quote that says, "Success is what you attract by who you become." And that just like I think a lot of people would share your story where you think it's the same person, different day. Like the environment changes, the team changes. And it's like you have to change. You have to become somebody better, someone different. And I just think, and the reason we know this is I would say, look at your network, look at the people you surround yourself. And just like your story, if you said, you naturally had some talents, and I had the similar things, but then when I got in a group of high achievers, I'm like, you're not that hot, Karen. And I loved it because I had these women surrounding me that showed me this is what I need to become. This level, but I had the desire within me. But I think if you don't surround yourself with excellence and elite players, you kind of don't know any different, and you play safe and you play small, and it becomes okay.
Yeah, and there's two things you said there I love pulling at a little bit. The first is that circle, right? Who you surround yourself with. We've heard the Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. What I find more interesting is Harvard social psychologist Dr. David McClellan estimates that 95% of our successes and failures can be attributed to the people we habitually associate with. And to your point, when we don't hang out with high performers and high achievers and we're doing well, it's really easy to become complacent and let our ego run because we're doing better than the people around us. And we know from studies, and especially the struggle that most humans have, we all really have with comparison, we find our happiness and joy in, are we doing better than the people around us? And so when you're the high achiever and you're doing well, and the people around you are doing okay, but not as well, you feel really good, which helps you take your foot off the gas because, well, I'm doing better than so and so. And that really drops the ceiling of who you could be because you stop striving to become your best and start striving to just stay above average. When you put yourself in a room of high achievers, just like you said, your eyes are open to what else is possible. And if I want to stay in this room and hang out with these people, I have to raise my game. And one thing I love to do is identify. I've got a few friends that are speakers, like, and I say this, they are friends, they are peers. There's no animosity, but I look at some of them, I'm like, that guy is a machine when it comes to prospecting. Like every time I sit down at my computer, it's like, am I prospecting today like Eric? Like, am I working the craft? Like, and what that does is it really forces me to say, am I where I am that's comfortable or am I going higher? And that's really, really important for us to have because high achievers don't want to hang out with low achievers. And so if you want to hang out with rooms with people that are going to force you to raise your game, you've got to be willing to do that. The other thing you said there that I loved is the Hal Elrod quote about attracting that level of success. And similar to our conversation at the very beginning of the show around mindset, the idea of the law of attraction can turn off a lot of people in corporate, in sales. They're like, listen, I don't manifest it. Like, I have to work for it, like all of this. And the way I look at that quote is very similar to the Bill Walsh quote. The San Francisco 49ers legendary coach would say that you earn your championship trophies in practice. You just pick them up on game day. It's the idea that who we become in the process ultimately takes care of the outcomes. And so in our work, what are we doing to improve ourselves, which improves how well we work? And if we do that consistently, the outcomes take care of themselves. It's like planting a field of seeds and harvest, right? You work the field, you plant the seeds, you water the seeds. There's weather, there's things that can cause delays in that timeline, but the harvest takes care of itself if you work the field. And so that's where that a law of attraction really comes in. It's that you become someone owning the process, and your outcomes are not going to be perfect, but you're going to have more positive and productive outcomes over time because of how you work the things within your control.
I love that. And I see a lot of people are focusing on things not in their control. And it's a downward spiral. And I'm like,
Yep.
why are you going there? You can't control it. But what you said there about the process, and just for me, it's all about getting addicted to the process. But
Oh yeah.
think about sales leaders and the way that they
We
evaluate
think we control the
performance.
sale.
They what?
We think we control the sale.
Sadly, we don't.
I know, right? That is the hardest thing for, I think, salespeople to understand. There's so many factors. So as a speaker, right, my life is sales. I am constantly evaluating how am I connecting with the right prospect, learning their problems, understanding and communicating the value I can bring to them, and then also knowing their timing and process, right? There's so many factors. There's people I connect with that it's not the right time. That's out of my control. What's in my control? How do I stay in touch? How do I communicate the value? How do I continue to nurture that relationship, right? There's some organizations, they don't have the budget. Okay, cool. Is there a way that we can work together? Or can I still provide you value and connect you with someone who maybe speaks at a lower fee or works at a lower fee? There's some people, it's not a fit regardless. Like, and so I understand that. And what happened for me a lot of times early in my career is I would get so roller coaster, right? On the gigs I would get, the gigs I wouldn't. And I had to get to a point of like, I don't control if they buy. I control how well do I communicate my value? How consistently do I work my pipeline? How good of a job do I do showing up and then over delivering once I get the opportunity so that then there's a future opportunity or referral. And what I found over the years is if I could divorce my happiness and worth from the outcome and understand I do not control that, but become obsessed and married to the work I do to get there, it changed everything because then you're able to roll from no to not now to not yet. I'm not the right person, and just see it as a giant science experiment that you're testing hypothesis and pulling at threads versus what a lot of us do is we see it as final exams. And if they say no, then we failed. And a lot of times that no may not even have to do with you. They may not have the budget, right? They may not, there's a lot of things, but what happens when we get into conversations? We learn stuff and then we understand it. And so I think that's where it goes, because I know we're all driven by outcomes, right? We have to have sales. It's part of our job performance. But a lot of times, especially on the management side, is we focus on the final piece of the sale and not what are your morning habits? What notes are you taking after every call, good and bad? What's your consistency in your prospecting? How quickly do you rebound when you walk into a doctor's office or wherever your prospect is and they say, no, not yet? How do you respond to that creatively? Like those are the things that are 100% in our control. And what we see is the people who are really good at not only being consistent with what's in their control, but little bit improving every day, the outcomes eventually take care of themselves. And they don't allow good outcomes to slow them down as the way a lot of us do when we're so fixated on that outcome.
And I love that, and I've gone through that shift as well, just detaching from the outcome, because I think women, even more so than men, we attach our self-worth to our outcome. But look at the way leaders
Oh,
evaluate
can I
performance.
say something on that?
Yes.
Can I want to chime in on that. And here's why. The only reason this is a relatively new. So I have a friend she's been speaking for over a decade. She's great. And recently there was an event that I had spoken at previously that she spoke at this year. And she reached out to me and was like, "Hey, will you text our event planner and get feedback for me?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Well, you get feedback. I don't think it went as well as I hoped." And I was like, "I'm not texting. Like I already texted the event planner when you signed and said, 'Hey, you're in great hands.' I'm not going to follow up and ask for feedback for you. Why are you worried about it?" She's like, "Well, I don't think I did very good." I was like, "Great. Ask them." And I said, here's the problem. And I was like, "I love you. But the challenge right now is you see how you did something, a skill, speaking on a stage, selling your product, your service as who you are, as your identity. And so you're scared to get feedback because you feel like it makes you a bad person if you get negative feedback. But if you look at it as a skill, you see, okay, this is something I can improve on. It's like, hey, you pick up a guitar. You're not very good at a guitar. Okay, if you change your grip and do this exercise, it'll improve how you perform. And that's how, to your point, we really stick in this. And I do see it typically more in female leaders than male leaders. Male leaders just tend to hide it a little bit better, I think, in my opinion, right? We're pretty good at hiding the vulnerability piece more in terms of that. But I still see it time and time again. And when you look at feedback on something you do versus who you are, then you can get better at what you do, building confidence in that piece.
Yeah, so important. That's one thing I say to my kids all the time. I'm like, "You're not a bad person. You just made not a great choice." You know?
Yeah.
And I think when people say, "Oh, I'm an idiot," it's like, "Are you kidding me?" Just say, "No, that wasn't a great choice." But you yourself, I think we take this all encompassing, and when we can remove ourself and the emotion, because I think we're oftentimes very close to it, we can start seeing it what it
Yep.
actually is and go, "You know what? I actually overspoke there." Or, I didn't pause long enough because I saw them leaning in and I feel the silence. And I think that takes, again, going back to desire, that desire and commitment to want to get better, to want to improve and be okay with the feedback, both positive and not negative is like, it's an awareness. It's like, okay, I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't know you didn't like that. Thanks for letting me know. I'll never do that again.
Yeah. And here's the saddest part about that is not everyone wants to get better. Not everyone has gotten to a point of pain where they want to change it or they found a goal or a reason worth motivating them to pursue it. And I think a struggle for a lot of leaders today is trying to take 100% of their organization and make them high performers. And unfortunately, that's never going to happen. And then what tends to happen, and I'm forgetting on who said this, but essentially 20% of your organization are going to be high performers, 60% are going to be your main group average, and then 20% are low performers. And what we spend most of our time on is the bottom 20 to 40%. What we should spend most of our time on is on the top 20% high performers, keeping them happy, motivating them, pushing them, and see how we develop the top tier of that middle group into high performers. Because my mistake early in business, especially when we started our brand, was thinking everybody wanted to get better. Why wouldn't you want to get better? Why wouldn't you want to improve? Why wouldn't you want to see what you're capable of? Because that was my mentality. And what I found is most people don't, because most people lean into their default and what's comfortable. And when we understand that as leaders, and say, there's some people I can't motivate. In fact, you really can't motivate anybody. What you can do is set the example and then inspire them and help set targets so they can improve. Then you stop exhausting yourself emotionally and from a time standpoint, trying to understand why the bottom performers will never be the top performers without understanding that's life, that's sports. Some of the most talented teammates I ever had were some of the laziest guys I've ever met. And they never play. Like some of them, I'm like, I think you could have played on Sundays. Didn't have the drive. And it didn't matter what we did, they never got that drive. Other guys had all the drive in the world. And I'm like, you don't quite have the talent for this, but long term, if you keep that drive, like you're going to be great at everything else. And so that's where we really have to pour ourselves into, because to your point, right? Not everybody wants to build that mindset. So how do we better leverage the ones in our organizations who do? And with guys like me and women and leaders like you that come in and work with teams, how do we help the mid tier elevate their game a little bit up, right? Increase their performance, because that massive impact on the organization. And then the bottom tier, how do we better identify? And if we can move them up into the middle, fantastic. But if not, we better identified who eventually is going to cycle out.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And for me, it is, I struggle with that too, because compete every day is my life. Like since I was a kid,
Yeah.
it's just even my kids, everything is a race and a game, and we probably could have a bit of balance. But it's weird when I meet someone not like this. I'm like, you don't want to get better, like even 1%, like Kaizen,
Yeah.
incremental growth. Yeah, I'm okay where I'm at. And so when you look at that with the sales teams, we do need, and I hate these words, but we do need the hunters and we do need the farmers. But I feel like when you don't meet them where they're at and you're painting everyone with the same brush, you're improving nobody, because they're all
Yep.
speaking different language. The levers you pull for the A's to bring them that last 5% that makes the world of a difference, they don't touch them because they think these guys are okay. That was me. Nobody touched me for 10 years. I'm like, all you had to do was tweak me and I could have went,
Yep.
up a gear that I didn't know, but nobody touched it. And I think they're almost afraid of that. But I just see a lot of times it's like if you could meet them where they're at, even connect with them and say, what is it that you need to move you? What is that motivation? How can I align to it? Because again, we can only model excellence to a certain level. It might not be their version of excellence that's going to motivate and inspire them.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. And to your point on that as well, what I see a lot of times is not only do we not touch the high performers because they're doing great, like they don't need our help, we need to spend it all over here. We don't praise them for the things that we expect them to do, right? We expect you to work hard. We expect you to be consistent. We expect you to show up and have a routine, but we fail to praise you for that. And really, where that sticks is it shows a lack of appreciation for your high performers. And we know from study after study, especially the last decade, that over 50%, I think the number hovers between 60 and 70% of people left their previous job due to a lack of appreciation and feedback from their manager. And you hear that and you think, well, that's just low performers. I'm like, I bet it's a lot of high performers when we really pull back, because they're expected to do the good job and then they're not praised for it. It's like, yeah, your parents, they expect you to make good grades. And if you make a good grade, they don't say anything because it's expected, versus, hey, I'm incredibly proud of how hard you worked on that. And so when we do that with high performers, they're probably self-motivated. You yourself, you're self-motivated, right? But they're still looking and craving feedback, because the people who want to be great, who want to improve, want feedback. They want help. They want help getting to a next level of they don't even know they have or they're aware exist. And so we have to be very mindful as leaders. First and foremost, we're modeling the standard of excellence so they see opportunity, but then consistently praise process that we talked about earlier, because process is the only thing in their control. And the more we praise it, the more important they see it. Because rewarded behavior is repeated behavior. And it's not just a dollar that reward, it's verbal praise, it's recognition, it's feedback that helps them improve.
I love that. And you're right. People think that they don't need it, but everybody wants to feel validated and heard and
Yep.
acknowledged. And I think when you're at that level, you're unconsciously competent. Like you actually don't know what you're doing because you just go through the motions.
Yep.
And even that praise might allow you to pause for a moment and realize, wow, this is what I'm doing. Because then you can actually support and help coach those bees. But when you're just going through the motions of excellence, which is good, but again, you don't recognize why you're doing it, what you're doing, that you can take it up a gear. And so that's a real gap and opportunity, I think, for sales leaders who, for whatever reason, are leaving those A's, wandering on their own.
They are. And that's the conversation I have with a lot of leaders and high performers when I ask questions about some of the things you're doing. And it's very uncommon. Like when I interviewed a CEO of a all virtual company, and they have sales guys and they have support team, and was asking how he builds his culture and how he does his touch points and check-ins and all that. I was like, I know you know this, but like the way you treat culture and the relationships in your organization is not common. Like I don't see it in a lot of these places. And he's like, I know, but we also have uncommon results. And there's a alignment there, right? And so all the chances we can get to praise the things that a lot of people may overlook is really important, because then it shows the importance to them. It recognizes them. And for a lot of people, especially high performers, the things you're doing you don't think anything about. You're on autopilot with a lot. You're on autopilot with your morning routine. Why wouldn't you have a morning routine, and how you treat yourself and how you go to the gym and how all of these things? But when it's recognized, you start to take more pride in it. And the more pride you take in it, the more you want to improve it. And so all of a sudden, the things you're already doing really well on autopilot start to go up to that next level, as you pointed out.
Hmm. And what about also, Jake, getting recognition is important, but also celebrating yourself, your little wins, and saying, hey, Karen, like, that was a really good job. I'm going to go and buy you a new workout top or something. But I feel
Yeah.
often as salespeople, we're just jumping onto that next opportunity and we're not even pausing and reflecting and saying, like, good job.
Oh yeah, we can't, because right, we expect ourselves to be great, right? And so there's a couple of things I love doing in this. The first is one of the exercises we do every week. I do personally every week. I encourage our audiences to do is start, stop, continue. Pulled it from sports psychology, but essentially every Friday, ask yourself, what's one thing I need to start doing next week to be more successful that I didn't do this week? What's one thing I need to stop doing next week that I did this week that's actually hurting my progress? And what am I doing well that I should continue? And that what am I doing well is really important, because it forces you to say, what am I doing that I'm proud of? And how do I keep doing it? And the reason that plays in is because we're all going to have stretches, regardless of how great we are at sales, where we get a lot of no's, right? Everybody's got that losing, mini losing streak, right? And in those streaks, you start to question yourself. It is a natural tendency. When the outcomes are not falling your way, you tend to doubt yourself, and that negative inner voice can be loud. But when you have evidence of the wins, of the big deal you closed, of the promotion you stepped into that you didn't feel ready for but have crushed, when you can go back and look at that evidence, you can start to build your confidence in moments of doubt, of saying, hey, I've been through tough situations before. Here's evidence of where I overcame it. Here's evidence of where I succeeded. Here's evidence of this. And you remind yourself of that during those processes to celebrate it versus dismissing it because, well, yeah, everybody else did that. Not everybody else did that. Not everybody else did that raising two kids. Not everybody else did that after getting 15 no's. Not everybody else did that in your market during this time in economic recession. Like, there's things to take a lot of pride in that we tend to dismiss because as high performers, we have such high expectations for ourselves. And when we do it, we tend to think, well, yeah, course, no big deal, versus to your point, celebrating it. And so I think that's really important, whether it's buying a new workout top, whether it's saying, hey, I'm going to plan a weekend away and I'm just going to go do a staycation or something, like setting that up. And I think those also help you do really well of keeping you recharged, especially the things where you plan, hey, I had a great quarter. I'm going to take a weekend and not work. I'm going to go unplug. I'm going to go do this. Helps you be at your best in those moments again. And if throughout our career, we're not tracking our wins and using them to reference back to when we have doubts, we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we're more likely going to struggle with that negative inner voice or questioning ourselves, imposter syndrome, whatever, when we get to that next level that we talked about at the very beginning that's required of us as we grow.
Hmm. And almost when you talk about the law of attraction, I know I don't even think things are woo woo anymore. I think woo is 90s. I think most people are embracing or open to this. But I think about when you do have a win, or you're looking back for those points of confidence, or those those memories to say, like, I did in the past, I can do it again. is we focus so much on the negative, but that's what we're attracting. We're attracting more of what
Yeah.
we don't want in our life. And so I just think, how can you keep something front and center that allows you to start and I'm not saying manifest, look at it's going to come, but like really align yourself with it, that your actions, everything are tracking towards what you want versus allowing that default, that negativity, that misery, that, oh, I'm never going to do that, because that's exactly where you go. And so I think, not only do you have to celebrate, you have to keep it front and center, and especially when the no's are compounding, because it takes, and you can see how it could sway you, but you have to have that belief and that confidence and that desire front and center all the time.
All the time. And an easy way to do it, a couple, right? So I have two whiteboards over here off camera. One that tracks my annual goals or my lifetime goals, really. And then I have my annual, quarterly goals, and then my monthly goal. And on the right, it's all on like projects in process. What am I chipping away at this year? What I used to have up there and I put into my phone is just the wins. Like, what are the difficult things that I've done throughout the course of my entire career? And I just have it, and it's under a thing of like days I need it. And that's literally the title of Days I Need It. And it's just a list of wins. Hey, you started a business selling t-shirts out of the trunk of your car, right? You somehow found a way to make it work, right? You rebounded from this situation. You pulled yourself out of this situation. You were able to do this. And what I do is I don't look at that all the time, but when I have days of getting those no's and I'm in a streak of like, when are we going to get that next gig? Right. You have that. I can always reference back to that and say, look where we are now. Look where I was then. Like if we did that, we can do this. And those are so helpful for those moments because negativity, to your point, is our default. And so we've got to have a way to stop that track.
Yeah, that's the gap in the gain, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
people disregard the progress they've made, and they're still looking at that big gap, that's to come. And it's like, but hang on a minute, like look at where you've come, even in 4 to 5 months. And what it also makes me think about is comparisonitis. And when you look at
Yep.
people who've perhaps, we'll talk about business owners for a moment, and they're like, oh, you're crushing it, and it's like you're an overnight success. And it's like, let me show you my, what did you call it? My days I need it. Like there's a
Yep.
lot of days that I didn't get that. And so I think people look at like just the success, and it's like, but do you know the amount of failures and setbacks it took me to get here? And this was a 6-year overnight success, not an
Six.
overnight success, right?
Yeah, there's always so much more to the story, and social media tricks us and LinkedIn tricks us and all of that, where you think like, oh, well, they just arrived, must be nice, and the must be nice default, right? I did a keynote in September to a group of business owners, small business owners, and they're part of a larger conference event, and the theme was really about sticking to the process, because they were noticing like some of them were chasing shiny objects, which happens, right? We get distracted, we get bored of the basics. And so I talked about where that had tripped me up early in my career. And I got on the screen, I pulled up my social media, and I went back to end of 2017, early 2018, which was really when I was starting my speaking part of our business and career. And I said, look at all this. Like I had cool pictures doing stuff. I was smiling. I had some quotes. Like I just scrolled through it. I was like, how great do things look there? And they were like, yeah, looks cool. I said, cool. Here's the deal. I was the most depressed I'd ever been in my life. I thought I'd destroyed my business making this pivot in the direction we were doing. I skipped paychecks for 2 months to make sure my team got paid because we weren't bringing in enough revenue, because I'd shifted all of our energies into building this other platform. I said, I was miserable. But if you were comparing yourself to me on social media, you were going to lose, because that was not real. And so when I told them that, a lot of them were like, oh, like I can relate to that. I said, yeah, like business is hard. It is very hard. And if we believe what we see online of how everyone else is quote unquote crushing it, then we start to dismiss and discredit ourselves, and we become demotivated because we're doing something wrong. We've missed our tipping point. We're not doing the right path, when in reality, we're probably doing the right thing. And a lot of the people I see, I mean, people I even know personally, I see their stuff online, and I was like, I know it's not that good. Like, I know you're not selling a course on how to make money. You're selling the course to make the money. Like you're making money off of that, right? Not on the how to. So like, and so I laugh about that, because to your point, the gap in the gain gets us, which is why we heavily preach, like it's every day, it's competition with yourself. What are you doing to get better? The Kaizen 1% better. Because if you put your happiness, your worth, your fulfillment in being better than someone else, there's always someone ahead of you, there's always someone behind you. And when you look at the people behind you, it inflates your ego, which causes you to relax, to take your foot off the gas. And 10 years from now, you're going to question why you didn't reach your full potential and what more you could have done if you'd actually set your bar higher and gone after what you were capable of. Or on the flip side, you look at someone who's so far ahead of you, someone that's in 20 years of sales and you're in 2, and you start to check out before the journey even starts because they have all of this success all figured out. I'll never get there. Versus what am I doing today to improve myself, my skills, and how I show up? And then asking yourself and answering it the same thing tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's so powerful, and it's almost like when you share that story, you've shown them behind the curtain, and, we all have friends that show this, "We're crushing it," or this beautiful relationship, and you're like, I know you're going to marriage counseling, so I don't know why you're posting that," but it allows
There
you.
was a study. It's funny. There's a study that said the more a couple post on social, the more likely dysfunctional the relationship is. Like
It's
there was a
true.
literally
Yeah.
study correlation, and I was like, oh,
It's when there's smoke, there's fire. I'm like, that's
mhm.
way I mean, I've got a great marriage, but I'm like, I don't need to post it because I live in the present. I'm enjoying the moments, and I just think
And because you're confident in it.
I
You don't
am.
need other people
I
to
don't.
validate
I
your
know.
relationship being good. And that's it.
And that's the thing with comparisonitis. When you show them that, you almost debunk it and say, like, now look at who you're comparing yourself to. Like, this is the iceberg. You see 10%. You don't know the other 90. You don't know if they've had, VC backing, if they had luck, if they had something else, or is it just like bootstrapping like you've done? Like, it's just all you can say. And I heard you say the me versus me approach in some of your podcasts. And I love
Yep.
that because even when my kids and they're racing, I say, who are you racing against? And they say me. I said, that's it. You want to be better than your last race or better than when you were yesterday. But I think we place so much emphasis and pressure on ourselves. And even back to the beginning of the call about, the outcome and so focus on the outcome. And I'm like, control with what you can control in the journey, in the process, because that's those leading indicators. When you get addicted to that, like you said, they'll control the outcome.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And as an athlete, you want nothing more than to finish an event, a competition, and a career, knowing I did everything I could, practice, preparation, and performance to maximize myself. I've won some, I lost some. Like that's part of the game. There's other people out there that beat me. Like it doesn't matter how talented you are, you don't win everything every time. But man, there was not a way I could have squeezed more out of myself for this. And otherwise, you're stuck with regret. You're like, what if I'd worked harder? What if I'd actually trained in the off season? And when you find fulfillment in how well you do compared to what you're capable of doing, it just changes how you show up because you're able to rebound from setbacks more. You don't get caught up in complacency as likely. And you're not as distracted by, well, what's this person doing? And I just got to be better than that coworker. You're like, what am I doing to get better? And I'm going to let the outcome take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. But I love what you said there, that fulfillment. Like, I just think about the journey we're on. And if you're bouncing all over the place, if you're trying to control things, like, you're not fulfilled. I just think the
No.
more we can stay in the present and really enjoy what we're doing, you lead a pretty good life.
Yep. Yeah, you do. I mean, there's so many studies that go out time and time again about happiness is not absolute. It's all, for the most part, it's all in comparison to how well you do with others, right? It's why you go buy a new car. It is your dream car. Your baseline is exploded up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks of feeling good. I got this new car, I got this dopamine high, and then it resets back down to normal. And a week later, your neighbor gets a new car that's completely different, but it's newer than yours. And you all of a sudden feel like, less than, right? Even though this was your dream car 3 weeks ago. So when we live in that constant state of comparison, there's just never enough. Comparison is the thief of joy. It's contributed or attributed sometimes to Theodore Roosevelt. There's a million people who have kind of gone back and forth on who said it, but it truly is what robs us of joy. And if we think about joy, the people who have joy doing the work do the best work. It's the idea of loving the work more than the outcome. The people who love the work outperform the people that do the outcome because the people that love the outcome yo-yo throughout their career. And the people that love the work just continually grind and rise.
And I think the work comes to those people more, naturally because of that.
Yep.
Yeah, they attract it. Well, listen, you've been amazing to speak with. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in learning a little bit more about you, your podcast, Compete Every Day, which is amazing, very uplifting. But again, it leaves you with some tactical ways to improve as well, not just leaving us on a high. I think we always need action behind it. Your programs, you're speaking. So, where is the best way for them to get in touch with you, Jake?
Yeah, easiest place to connect is going to be my website, jakeathompson.com. And if you're a little more active on social media, I tend to hang out in only two spots. So I'm on LinkedIn, Jake Thompson Speaks, and then the same username on Instagram. And so anything we talked about here on the show, if you're like, hey, I want to pull at that thread a little bit more, or I have a follow up question that y'all didn't get into, shoot me a message. Would love to be able to answer that and provide some value for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your time with all of us. And thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next time.